The Winnipeg Jets season is still a bit of ways away, and we're not even through the offseason. But you know what? I've got a bit of a wish list for Winnipeg that I hope we see this upcoming season. Things are trending in the right direction, though. All told, I'm more positive and bullish about Winnipeg's future long term than I was previously. But in the short term, the Jets still have some work to do. And we'll talk about what I want to see for next season on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Evening, folks, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. As always, thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is completely free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. But most of all, more than anything, we just really love and appreciate your support. Now, on tonight's episode, like I said, got a couple of topics that I want to go through. I've got 3 things on my wish list for the upcoming Winnipeg Jets season. I think it could be, a reasonably interesting season, at least on the ice. But in terms of other stuff around the team, there are some things that I think Winnipeg really needs to work on. The first that I think the Jets need to do is improving the connection to the fan base. And already I feel like they've kind of changed their approach after what we saw with that Forever Winnipeg thing. I think the universal reaction to that campaign was amusement and also kind of irritation. I feel like the messaging that the Jets gave off heading into the playoffs was not a particularly well-received one. It sort of read like a threat to the fan base. And to be honest, I don't think people really took kindly to it. I think a lot of fans were kind of pissed off, and rightfully so. I mean, this team's been around for a while. The level of success that the Jets have generated is modest, generally speaking, and fans have to pay a lot of money to go to these games. So I feel like, all told, I'm not surprised that maybe the reaction was a little more lackluster than I think the Jets would have wanted. When you kind of pivot now towards the training camps, it feels like a totally different atmosphere and environment. It really feels like the Jets have tried to kind of get away from the current core and really focus on the future, which is interesting because the team keeps talking about wanting to be playoff competitive now. And yet when you look at the way that they talk about these young prospects and how the narrative is really shifting towards an extremely likable, personable group of guys, lots of natural leadership qualities, and a real connection to the fans. I mean, we saw McGroarty and Neaton and a number of other players really taking extra time and hanging around in the hallways to talk to fans, to sign autographs, to chat with the fans, to really get to know them. It feels, and it could just be a perception just because the Jets are really pushing this narrative, but it really does feel a lot more intimate and close than the current Jets core. And that's not to say that the current Jets are necessarily distant from the fans, but I feel like in this environment and what we're seeing, there's really been a focus on connecting at a more grassroots level. And that, for me, is a step in the right direction. I think the Jets really owe it to the fans to kind of really get back into the Winnipeg spirit. And it's not that, again, I'm not saying that the Jets are really out of it necessarily, but over the past couple of years, if you ask yourself, how attached do you feel to this team and how much you feel that two-way street has been reciprocated, I'd be surprised if people would really say that they feel a particular connection to the Winnipeg Jets. These days, it just feels like they're a team to watch because they're from Winnipeg, they're the local team, and that's the one that you support. But I remember back in the old days when I was excited to be a Jets fan, and I just haven't felt that as much. This recent pivot and the way that they're kind of selling this future vision of the Jets, I would say is the most interested I've been in the long-term prospects of the team in a very long time. Short-term prospects, obviously, last season was really exciting until the second half skid. But in terms of at least, a change of pace from the Maurice era, yeah, the Bones Brigade had a lot of promise. But I think in terms of the overall picture of the team, the longer-term vision of what the Jets are wanting to build, this current developing core feels like the one that could maybe shift a lot of things in the right direction. And if you start off with really grassroots approaches to connecting to the fan base, getting them on board, and getting buy-in from Jets fans, I feel like that is a really good way to endear yourself to the city, reconnect to the fan base that's kind of been, I'd say, more detached. I mean, the season ticket sales have gone down, the attendance has dropped. All of this is certainly a byproduct of Winnipeg just not really having been connected to the city as much in the right ways that I think it used to be. The honeymoon phase is over. What's left? A team that's had mostly middling success and has rising ticket prices. They've tried to cut down on concession prices, but it's not always caught up at the right times. So there's a lot of stuff wrapped into that I think is certainly having an impact. But, what I'll say is this. With how the Jets are starting to do stuff and some of the messaging that's going out and their focus on this new young burgeoning group of players, I'm liking the approach. I think what they're doing and how they're doing it makes it feel more family-like. And I think that would be a really good thing going forward. We know that Winnipeg really values its hardworking blue-collar players. We know that they like a family atmosphere and one that's very inviting, very friendly. And I think if the Jets continue to push towards this direction, I think you're going to see a lot more of a warmer reception from the city. There's some other stuff that's going to be folded into that, though, right? I think, obviously the ticket sales are going to have to change a little bit. The ticket pricing might have to change. But there are some other things that I would say the Jets have done pretty well, and we'll talk about what some of those are in just a little bit. Before we go any further, though, I do want to shout out our friends and partners at FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet and bonus bets of up to $200. That's right, just $20, and you'll land $200 back in bonus bets. Win or lose, we all like a little bit of a guarantee. That's $200 you could spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. A lot of you are probably Jays fans. I'm an Orioles fan. I'm sorry. Some of you are also probably Twins fans. Again, as an O's fan, I'm sorry. They just beat the Twins. I'm not going to rub that in, but you know what? No matter who you root for or support, FanDuel is the best place to bet on all of the latest MLB action. They've got an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. And most importantly, you get paid instantly when you win. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Folks, thank you for returning and joining us as we're talking about my wish list for next season. I said the first thing on my wish list was to improve the connection to the fan base, which I think the Jets have made strides in already, especially after a kind of odd messaging spout at the end of this past season. It seems like the future prospects and stuff are maybe shifting the messaging once again to a more intimate feeling. The other thing that I think the Jets would really be wise to do is continuing their community initiatives. I know that like the warm-up jerseys and stuff have been banned thanks to the NHL being really stupid, but overall, I would say that the recent community and event nights that the Jets have been doing have really been awesome. This past year, they really focused on adding more Asian awareness nights, and I think that's pretty awesome as like a half Korean myself. I think that's fantastic. I think that's really important. And I think the Jets have done a good job of making a lot more of these community initiatives very public. The Jets have always been strong supporters of Pride Night. They've been supporters of, obviously, First Nations folks and initiatives. A lot of the community centers around Winnipeg, they've really endorsed. You have Wasak Night, which I think is awesome. I think that there's a lot that the Jets are doing well, and I want to see them continue to do that. Now, I don't know what the form is going to look like just because with the warm-up jerseys kind of taken away, obviously the most important thing is the event night itself, but it just when you're having players on the ice, it is kind of really cool to see them visibly wearing something endorsing that initiative. And I think, without it, it's going to be a little odd, but I think the Jets are going to find other ways to do it and, show their support for it. I think regardless of what you say about Winnipeg over the past couple of years, especially in regards to the fan base, I have to say that I really like the way that they've approached their community initiatives and stuff like that. I think that they've done a much better job of connecting to the local community in that way. And it's I guess it's important because you don't really see it as much with some other teams. They do have some event nights and stuff, but I think the way that the Jets have done it and how many they've done is pretty cool. And so for all of my criticisms of how the team has done stuff over the years, that is one thing that I think they've really gotten better at. And I was really impressed with it this past year. I think that's a fantastic initiative. I think it's a great push. I think they should do even more with it. And I'd love to see them develop even more community nights and events like that. I think that's probably one of the coolest things that's come out of this team over the past few years. And with that, I kind of wonder, more involvement with the community. I know the Jets have tried to do like a fan council. I haven't heard a lot about it, after the initial introduction. I've seen mentions of the council before, but in terms of what's discussed at these meetings, I have no idea. I assume it's like feedback related and getting a general vibes check with the fan base, but I don't know beyond that. I would like to see how the Jets can include more of the fan base going forward in some of the decision-making processes and event nights. I feel like they're pushing in the right direction with a lot of things. It's just obviously getting up to speed and kind of modernizing that's still a work in progress. But overall, the vibes for me are getting pretty good. And I think when you have a fan base that feels connected to the Jets and feels really close to the team, you're going to see a rise in ticket sales. I think, with folks wanting to support good causes and, a team that they feel is standing up for the right things, you're going to see more and more of Winnipeg come out to support the team. And I think, it's a very mutually beneficial relationship. The Jets give back and really contribute to the community, and the community in turn supports the team. So there's a great two-way bridge there, one that I think the Jets would really be wise to work on rebuilding. Not that it's broken necessarily, but I'd say, the last few years that relationship has certainly taken a bit of a turn in a not so great direction. And it'd be nice if things were back to a healthier state. So, yeah, I think the Jets in general, in terms of stuff that's not necessarily related to the on-ice performance, I think Winnipeg's getting better at it. I do think they probably shouldn't have done that Forever Winnipeg campaign. I feel like that was probably pretty ill-timed, and I don't think most of us really appreciated the messaging. Threatening to have the Jets leave wasn't really a great feeling when Winnipeg hadn't won many games recently and was barely holding on to a playoff spot. So, yeah, get away from that kind of messaging. Do more of the inclusive, all-encompassing, and really inviting messaging. I think that's what Winnipeggers are going to really appreciate, and maybe even a few extra nights with some concession deals. I think we would all love a few extra freebies here and there. But overall, I got to say, when it comes to community initiative and event-based nights, the Jets have really hit it out of the park. Now, I guess in terms of one more thing on my checklist for next season, I just want the team to be fun again. We'll talk about how I think Winnipeg can kind of get there and some stuff that I think they're already pushing towards. Hello, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Everydayers, thank you for rejoining us for these final thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Jets. Just wanted to quickly wrap up with some, I guess, lingering wish list items for next season. Well, it's only really one wish list item, but it encompasses a lot of things. I think for next season, I just want the Jets to be fun again. I think for half a season last year, they were really fun. The vibes were immaculate. Social media was a buzz with the Jets. The fan base seemed to be really bought into the early days of the Bones Brigade. There was just a different feeling with this team that we haven't had in several years. And then it kind of went away in the second half, and obviously things got a little bit bitter. But I think the Jets can really come back to that this year. Already the roster is seemingly adding more scoring talent, which I think is good. That's going to mean more production in games, which hopefully means, a lot more excitement. I also think, speaking of production, just in a very different sense, the in-arena atmosphere is something that the Jets have tried to improve over the past season or two. Still not quite there, though. I'm hoping to get up there this season to get a better sense of what they're doing this offseason. I know like the on ice graphics was something that they were really excited about with like the laser shows and stuff. But I know, you look at teams with much bigger budgets out in Vegas and stuff, and like their whole fan atmosphere is just insane. But very different market, very different resources, and a very different experience. The Jets are probably more comparable to most average NHL teams. When I went to Washington's games, I didn't really feel like it was that much better than what the Jets do atmosphere wise. But all the same, I think the single biggest problem that's really come up with Canada Life recently is just how quiet it is. The fans just don't really seem to be like super enthusiastic about the hockey. And that's partly because the team hasn't really given fans a lot to cheer for. I think this coming season, we're going to see better atmosphere, hopefully, more liveliness, more excitement. And I think the Jets could do with finding ways to spice it up and bring more fan involvement into it. I don't know what that's going to look like necessarily. I don't know that it's necessarily like having, intermission game trivia or something like that. I know other teams have done it. I know the Jets have occasionally done it, certainly with the Moose as well. We've seen it, but I don't know. Something feels like it's just not quite there. And maybe it's because the team itself hasn't really been that exciting over the past several years, and that's why the fan base isn't really as engaged or as excited in game. But I just feel like Canada Life at times has come across a little bit like a mausoleum, and we know that it can be so much louder and crazier in there. I was there, obviously several years ago now, but we all remember that magical playoff run, that series against Nashville. That was like one of the craziest, most chaotic sporting environments that I've been in. And I've been to like some pretty crazy ones. Like I've been overseas to see some, European football, and what the Jets fan base put on here or in North America was something that probably rivaled that passion and adrenaline and blood pumping action. It was crazy in Winnipeg, that series. And I just want to kind of go back to those days. I think we've all been kind of craving positive vibes, something to feel good about with this team. It's been a while, I would say, since we've really locked in and felt connected to the team and excited for the prospects of the future. I think we're getting there, though. I think that the Jets are building something intriguing, and I don't know if it's going to work. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that all of the players that they're bringing up are going to make the NHL and be prominent. I have a feeling that a lot of them are, but I can't guarantee it, and I can't guarantee that how they want to build this room going forward and what they want to do with the atmosphere of the rink and of the game day experience is going to be immaculate. But it feels like they're trying to fix things and work on it. So, with a few more alterations and changes over the next few seasons, maybe we'll start to really push towards what feels like the way you're supposed to experience Winnipeg Jets hockey. I felt it a few years ago, but it's definitely gone away over the past couple of seasons. It's time to bring it back and make the good times roll again. I'd be curious to know what's on your wish list, though. Are you hoping for cheaper concessions, maybe better ticket package deals? What do you want the Jets to offer? I feel like, for those of you who have been longtime subscribers, both to me and to the Winnipeg Jets season ticket holding and stuff, let me know what you feel Winnipeg has been lacking in. I know customer service was one area where, at a very basic level, it felt like maybe the Jets had let that slip. A lot of people were talking about not getting callbacks from season ticket holder reps. Other people were saying, no, they've been responsive to me, but it's very hit or miss. You see a lot of different responses, and that is not necessarily a great sign. So let me know what you're thinking of, what you want the Jets to do, and what you're hoping for this upcoming season. Give me your personal 3 top wish list items, and maybe I'll talk about it on a future episode. But for tonight's show, that is going to be all the time that we have. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. We will see you back here next week with even more off-season coverage. So, as always, thanks for listening. Have a great night, and go Jets go.